Today is Saturday, which means it is our DIY and crafting video day. More specifically, today is the second video in our series about how to sew from a pattern. So last week we covered how to read a pattern cover. You'll remember we talked about how to find out what size you are in patterns, how to know what kind of fabric or how much fabric you would need, what kind of fabric you would need, what extra stuff like zippers and buttons and bias tape and all that you would need. This week we're going to talk about the actual pattern pieces themselves. And you may not realize this if you've never looked at them before, but the pattern pieces are actually quite telling. You can learn a lot from them. So today, as my prop, I guess, I'm going to be using one of my Colette patterns. Colette is like an independent designer, a pattern designer, so you know, it's a lot different than sewing from the mainstream ones. They really take their time in these independent ones to explain each step. Colette's one of my favorites. They are actually, the women themselves that design the clothes are very kind of curvaceous. Their style is more in the 50s. So for us women who aren't models, these patterns are really great and typically fit really well the first time you make them, which is also really nice. But anyways, back to today's lesson. I digress. So in your pattern cover, you're going to get little folded up pieces of tissue paper. Actually, they're quite large pieces of tissue paper. You can see this one is actually this big. Like that. They're huge. Huge, huge, huge. Big pieces. And on each piece are a bunch of drawings. And in the drawings are some helpful information, which is what we're going to cover today. So basically on each pattern piece you're going to get a couple of things. You're going to get the actual name of the pattern that you're making. So this one is Colette Patterns 1004. That will always help you know, okay, all of these guys go together. These belong to one pattern, and it is, you know, whatever pattern it is. So I think that that's like a really helpful thing if you're scatterbrained like me and maybe not so organized. We should work on that. Maybe we'll talk about that in another video. Then beyond that, you're going to see a letter. And that is, the letter is the name of the pattern piece. So in your booklet, they have taken all the pattern pieces and given them a letter to help you identify which one it is. Because sometimes, like when they're all laid out like this, it's hard to tell what is what and what goes where. So they lay them all out for you, and then they explain exactly what they are. So again, just labeling that on the pattern piece itself helps you know what piece you're working with at that time. Also, this pattern isn't a good example of this, but other patterns will have like every other size on one piece and then every other size on another piece. So, or it'll have different variations of the same dress. Like you remember the one we talked about last week, option A had a ruffle and option B didn't. So in that regard, the label of the pattern piece itself will help you know, okay, do I need this piece or do I need the other piece, or is, you know, it'll help you know which ones you need and which ones you don't need, because you don't always need every single pattern piece that is printed on the tissue paper. I hope that makes sense. After that, it tells you in words what the piece is. So this one is skirt center front. So you know that you're making the center front of some part of your skirt. In this case, it's pretty clear what that is. It's just a little, we're looking at that piece right there. And then after that, it tells you what you need to cut. So sometimes dresses have a lining, sometimes they have interfacing, sometimes they have, I don't know, all kinds of different things. So it tells you exactly what you need to cut of each piece. So on this one, it says we need, what does it say? Shell cut 1 and lining cut 1. So from our main fabric, we're going to need 1 piece, and our lining fabric, we're going to need 1 piece. And that may be obvious. Like, you're making a line dress, you need 1 of each of them, but sometimes you need multiple versions or multiple pieces of the same piece. Like, for example, sleeves. You're going to need 2 sleeves, so you're going to have to cut 2 of them. It also says on here you're going to have to cut this pattern piece on the fold. So it tells you that in words, and then also shows you with this little arrow doohickey. See that arrow thing? That means that this whole edge goes on the fold of your fabric. So when you're laying it all out, which we'll do next week, I know, okay, that one's got to go on the folded edge. That way we cut it once, open it up, it's completely symmetrical. I know. Like, they really do think of everything in these patterns. They can be a little overwhelming, but once you break down piece by piece like we're doing in this series, you'll see that, okay, this actually makes a little bit of sense. Okay, so outside of that, then we have all these crazy lines on the edge here. And you can see the numbers at the top there, number 0 through 18. Those are the sizes. So last week we figured out what size you are. This week, you're going to take that size that you determined and you're going to find the line. So, you know, for this size 12, it is a dash and 2 dots, dash and 2 dots. So you're going to cut along the dash and 2 dots. On every single piece, we'll have a dash and 2 dots for the number 12. So you just know, you can go through here and you never get confused. Is that line 12? Is that line 18? What line are we talking about here? And so you just cut around the whole thing right where your size is. Now, when you get good or more confident in what you're doing, you are actually, you kind of, I don't know if it's laziness or if it's actually being more resourceful, but I don't ever cut my pattern pieces out on the exact line, because my thinking is I'm going to lay it out on the fabric and I'm going to have to cut it exactly on the line on the fabric. So why am I going to cut it out twice? So I just cut it out with like a little border around it, just that one piece with a little border around it. And then whenever I lay it out on my fabric, I cut it exactly on the line, and then I only have to cut once. But if you're a beginner, I will say it can be tricky because of the different sizes, and you don't want to, you only have one chance to cut your fabric. You have many chances to cut this in theory. So if you're a beginner and this is your first pattern, go ahead, take your pattern pieces, cut each one out exactly on the line, exactly where your size is, be very precise about it, and you know, the more comfortable you get with it, just kind of know in the back of your head, you can move toward being a little more free-handed with the cutting, knowing that, you know, your instincts are going to help you cut it correctly onto your fabric. So that's the lesson for today. Just wanted to kind of introduce you to the pattern tissue and kind of explain some of the things that were going on there. Most patterns, I think this one might have one too, has a little explanation of what some of the drawings, what some of the symbols on the patterns mean. This one does not, but you'll see in other patterns here. I think I have one right here. You can tell how much I sew. I just had another pattern just laying out right there. So yeah, this right here. So you'll see then, and then down below it talks about, you know, what each of those symbols mean, and talks about different treatments you can do to your pattern pieces themselves. Like some of these patterns will help you shorten or lengthen at your waist, or shorten and lengthen the hem, or like if you're smaller on top and bigger on bottom, how to grade that into like a natural, you know, curve of your body. They'll teach you stuff we're going to get into next week. But here's that, you'll see number 4 are those arrows that I was telling you about, which means to cut it on the fold. So it'll tell you that. And yeah, a lot of this other stuff we're going to go over next week. So speaking of next week, we're going to talk about laying out your pattern, how that's done, pinning everything, cutting it out on the fabric and marking it, because there's a lot of little things that need to be transferred from the pattern to your garment. Darts, pleats, all those sorts of things. There's little dots that help you know where things lie. Anyways, we're gonna talk about that next week. So be sure to tune in next week. As always, if you enjoyed watching this video, please help me out, give me a thumbs up. If you want to make sure not to miss any other videos in this series or any of the other videos I'm posting every day, be sure to click the subscribe box. As always, I always reply to comments. So if you have any questions about anything that I went over today or in last week's series, leave those below. I will have a link to last week's video in the description box as well. Anyways, that's it for lesson 2. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later. Thanks.